So one of the greatest contributions, one of the greatest things that medicine has given to public health, one of the most important contributions, this is how papers open. I'm not talking about vaccination, but this kind of hyperbole was applied to another intervention, and that is antibiotics. And so in the middle of the Second World War, with the introduction of penicillin, there was a miracle. Suddenly, the outcome of battlefield injuries in soldiers was changed from gangrene to survival by the introduction of penicillin. A miracle. Neurosyphilis, the history of neurosyphilis was dramatically changed by penicillin. The problem is, the dream has become a nightmare. And this is because you cannot outwit nature. And it's become a nightmare for three reasons. I was reading in the USA Today just yesterday, you may have seen this, about CRE, a multi-resistant bacterium, which is highly lethal. There are 15,000 deaths a year in this country from multi-resistant bacteria. The miracle has become a nightmare. For three reasons, principally, I believe. One is nature. If you put selection pressure on organisms, they will mutate. And microbes will mutate at a very fast rate, and they will acquire resistance. And so we have put selection pressure upon those organisms, and when you acquire the genetic machinery to develop resistance, it is an accelerated process, because once you've acquired that, the next time you mutate, or there's more selection pressure, you acquire resistance even more quickly. So there is a biological effect. You cannot outwit nature. The second is that there is this insatiable pharmaceutical industry, greed. So they would develop new and more powerful antibiotics and put pressure on the frontline physicians to make those first-line treatments. Not to start with a milder antibiotic, but to go in with a blunderbuss, because that's what made the money. And that puts even further genetic selection pressure on organisms. And the third was a medical error, and that was the indiscriminate use of antibiotics as a first-line treatment for example, ear infections that were never ear infections. Your child has a slightly pink eardrum, let's put them on an antibiotic. And those three things conspired together to create what we have now, which are multi-resistant bacteria. And the irony of this is the pharmaceutical industry, certainly the major players in that industry, are no longer investing in the development of new antibiotics. Why? Because the bacteria acquire resistance before the antibiotic comes to market. And therefore there is no commercial reason to do it. And so suddenly the population is left naked, is left exposed to this new, highly adapted, highly resistant group of organisms which are extremely pathogenic, with a very high mortality and morbidity, with no defense. And that's the reality. Nature will not be fooled, and so the dream has become a reality. And exactly the same thing is happening with vaccines. For the same reasons. There is a biological reason, and that is these organisms, viruses in particular, can adapt at extraordinarily high rates. When they introduced the hepatitis B vaccine, what they called as escape mutants developed almost immediately. These are strains, serotypes of the hepatitis B vaccine which eluded the protection conferred by the vaccine. In fact, this work was done by Ari Zuckerman and the World Health Organization, working at my own medical school, at least where I worked some time ago, when I did. And this escape mutant, they believed at the time, and it's come to pass, would become the dominant serotype of this organism. And that happened almost immediately. If you look at pneumococcus, exactly the same thing has happened. There is an escape mutant of the pneumococcal vaccine that has come about because of the vaccine. And so what we've done is we've gone from Prevnar 7 to Prevnar 13 because the organism has continued to develop vaccine-resistant serotypes. And it's not a process that man can keep up with. There will come a time when they just say, okay, the organism's beaten us, and we can't do it. And the other ecological effect of this is when you look at the reduction in pneumococcal disease in children following the initial introduction of the vaccine, there was a reciprocal increase in severe pulmonary infections from the same serotype in adults, empyema, often a fatal pulmonary infection. And so the change in the population microbiome, the change in the organism in the child, had a knock-on effect in the adult population. If you change things, if you try and outwit nature, nature will exact a very, very high price. And there will come a time when the industry says, no more, okay? We can't do this anymore, we can't keep up, because the organism has outwitted us. So there are two examples of, a biological effect. And on the back of that, you have also the insatiable greed of the pharmaceutical industry, which is now so heavily invested in vaccine production that they can see nothing else. And of course, the medical profession, which has conspired with that industry to push these vaccines on people. When I go to meetings now, chiropractic meetings, where they bring their children, it's really quite frightening to see them because they are so healthy. They're unvaccinated, but they are terrifyingly healthy. What a cruel irony that you should be terrified by a healthy child. And I say, you are going to inherit the earth. You and the Amish will inherit the earth, because whether you want it or not. But it does make you realize how sick the children are, that one would see in their routine day-to-day practice, certainly at the Royal Free Hospital.